Well, welcome to Student-Led IEP. My name is Micaela Smith. I am a teacher of the visually impaired, an orientation and mobility specialist, and currently working as a travel instructor with the St. Paul Public Schools. I've been in the field for, 12 years now, maybe 12 years. And it worked in Wisconsin, and I'm currently on our WAER board. So tied into 2 states, but here's some greater information at least. More about me. I love using person-centered approaches, and part of that blends really nicely with student-led IEPs. And a person-centered approach is really just more of getting to know somebody, asking questions about not only what we really want to know as far as an IEP goes, but what's valuable to those people. What's valuable to your student? What's valuable to the family? What are some barriers? What are some loves, right? So as a way to model that, and we've done this with IEPs too, kind of starting off with the opening slide, just saying, who are you? This is mine. On the hopefully the left side of your frame, there's an image of my family down in Florida from probably about 2 years ago, before our COVID disruptions. And I have 2 boys. Henry just turned 10 this last week. Jacob is 8, and my husband Carl is actually currently on a meeting downstairs, so hopefully it doesn't trail up. We were able to ride on an airboat, and it was a fantastic trip with the family. In the middle, I have a picture of my Great Dane. Her name is Ursa. We have 2 Great Danes and a Black Lab in our household. And they are big members of our family and typically come out in stories. I love coffee. There's an image of coffee up at the top of the screen. Coffee is what makes my day go round. It's the best thing to give to me. If you're willing to give treats, coffee is it, right? That's a motivator for me. And then on the other side of the page, there's an image of our porch looking out into the acreage. We live on 80 acres in Wisconsin, and it's beautiful, it's amazing, and it is so valued in our family and in my life to be able to have room to roam and space to be. The last image on this is a picture of some needles, syringes, along with diabetes type 1. It's important for me to share with people that I'm a type 1 diabetic. This is something that if we're looking at really student-led IEPs, a lot of times things that are hard to share are the things we leave out. So being able to acknowledge it in a way that is friendly is super important. I'm very friendly to share that I'm a diabetic, but there are times when it just doesn't happen, and it makes a huge impact of my day. So think about your students and some of the things that they may be able to share in a different method. All right, here comes the fun part. I want to learn a little bit more about you all. So because we have a fairly close-knit group here, let's go through and share what's your current role, and maybe even just what are you hoping to get from this today. I'll try to call out if that works. Miss Julie, can you please start us off?
Sure. I'm Julie. I am Mac's mom, and he's 4.5, and he has vision deficits, I would say. We're in Wisconsin, the Muskego School District, so southeast Wisconsin. And I have Mac is my middle child, and I have a 6-year-old, and I have a 2.5-year-old who you might hear because he's busy playing in a sensory bin right now, making a mess. And I work full-time for McKesson, which is a drug distributor, and I am thankful I get to work from home. So I am always looking like a hobo and sitting at my kitchen table working. And my kids go to school. And I am looking forward to just learning more about the IEPs, because I actually have Mac's IEP meeting next week. So this is perfect timing.
Excellent. Thank you. Emily, would you be willing to go next?
Absolutely. Hi, my name is Emily Brown. I am an orientation and mobility specialist. I am new to the field. It is my first full year being by myself as an itinerant O&M. So I work at CCR 5, and I do travel twice a week down to the school in Janesville. So Dave is someone who is, I think I've met you, Dave, before. So it's really good to see a familiar face here. Besides that, I am here to learn more about my preschool kiddos, students. Just being new to the field, I would love to have a little more information how I can best support my preschool students.
Thanks, Emily.
You're welcome.
Jen, would you be willing to go next?
Sure. My name is Jen Gettleman. I am the deaf-blind consultant on the West DHH, the Deaf and Hard of Hearing outreach teams, as well as the Wisconsin Deaf-Blind Technical Assistance Project, or WDB-TAP. And I am just looking for ideas and resources to share with the teams I work with. As well as my daughter has an IEP, so hopefully I can bring some of this to her team.
Excellent. Thanks, Jen. There's some images as we go through from one of the students who is deafblind in it, so hopefully that'll align with some of the hopes.
Great.
Mr. Hyde, do you want to share a little bit?
Sure. I'm Dave Hyde. I work at the Wisconsin Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired with Tricia Weiss. My role is professional development for teachers and orientation instructors around the state. And my other role is being the parent liaison for families of children from, about birth to 12 years old, before transition age. In that job, I get to meet some marvelous people. I get to work with families, and being a blind person myself, be the bad example of what their kids should not grow up to be like. Now, I like to share hope with families that because you have a blind child, things can be okay. And all they really need is a lot of, you have to have the right attitudes, you have to have some additional training, but being blind is not the most important thing in that child's life, and it shouldn't be in yours. Personally, I have been a member of a nationwide organization of blind people for over 45 years. I've served everything from as a chapter president to a national board member. So I enjoy consumer activities. I have a wife. We've been married now for about 45 years, and our only child has 4 legs. So we are doing well, and I'm looking forward from this presentation to get more information I can share with families.
Thanks, Dave. It sounds like in many ways it's more of a role model, not the one that's influencing the wrong way. You're a role model. I like it. Thank you. Tricia, do you have anything else you want to add?
Maria did come in. So we have another one, that Maria Scoville.
Thank you. Maria, we're just talking about what our current, are you a parent, student, teacher? What's your current role? And what is something you're hoping to get out of the presentation today?
Well, hello. Sorry for my lateness. I was in another meeting. I am Maria Scoville. I am the IEP coordinator at the School for the Blind, where Trisha and Dave both work. I'm also a TVI and a special ed teacher. What I would hope to gain out of this one is just more about it. We haven't had a lot of experience with student-led IEPs, but I would always like to see how it works.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mhm.
All right. Let's keep moving. So we're going to first start off with just the components of an IEP. What is this IEP? An IEP is an individualized education program. It's a written statement for a student with a disability that is developed, reviewed, and revised by a team of people, including the family, and it outlines an educational plan for the student. That's a lot of legal terms and descriptions. Essentially, it's a legal document that helps our teams program, plan, understand, and use data to really drive student success. We identify students' educational abilities and their needs. The learning goals that are within an IEP are based on those student needs and the dreams that our families have. And it describes the service that will be received in order to reach those. This information came from our DPI website. It's important to know that your child or any student is the I in the IEP, right? As teams, as families, you all know these children the best. So having the parent input is key, and even better, having the student input is key. Students often have a different view than adults have, and it's important to honor that. So voices of all types are really important within the IEP process. On the screen, there is an image of what percentage of people, hold on one second, I gotta move this slightly over. My screen is all goofy all of a moment. Percentage of speaking time by each role of the IEP team member. So IEP teams must have family, include special education teachers, general education teachers, an administrator or a district designee, related service providers such as speech or OT or PT, even health, and then your child, the student. The image on the screen shows that the student typically has about 3% of speaking time at an IEP meeting. Special education teachers typically dominate the meeting. They're the leads, so it does make sense in that way, but they typically speak about half of the IEP meeting. Family members typically have about 15%. Administrators at 9%, general education teachers at 9%, and then additional sports staff about 6%. When finding this information from Van Dyke, Martin, and Lovett, it was published in 2006. That striking point of 3% really caught my eye for student engagement in their IEPs. It is amazing, even at preschool level, how much a student can share about the things that they experience within their day and give suggestions about how their days could be improved upon. And we should value that. This next slide has student involvement within the IEP more from the transition lens. And it also takes a look at involvement, meaning were they a part of the planning? Were they a part of the meeting itself? Were they thought part of that problem solving and solutions. This graph shows that 5.5% typically do not give any input to their IEPs. For our older students, transition age, meaning about 14 or high school, middle school, high school, there are about 58% that attend the meetings and provide a little bit of input. There's about 25% that provide like very little or no input. And then there is about 12% that take that leadership role in the planning process. It's wonderful that we have so many students being able to attend and being asked to provide some more input, but part of the goal of a student-led IEP is that they start to be able to take on that leadership role and be able to develop their additional skills for post-secondary. So they're ready for college, for careers, for whatever that dream goal after their public education is. All right, question time. So we'll try to go through the list again. The question is, what is your experience at an IEP meeting? 3 options, but you can share something else. One would be, it's a lot of listening with a little participation. 2 is more of a sarcastic one. What, should I even be at an IEP meeting? Maybe you've never been involved in it, it's happened before. Or 3, I'm an active participant in that IEP team meeting. So 1, a lot of listening, little participation. 2 is really no participation. And 3 would be an active participant. Why don't we just give a shout out, everybody. You can just unmic and share.
I would say that for me, it's a lot of listening as a parent with a little participation, but I would love to be feeling like I'm more of an active participant.
This is Jen. As a teacher, I was a very active participant in the IEP process and the meeting. As a parent, I would agree. It's mostly listening with very little participation.
This is Maria. As the IEP coordinator, I'm an active participant because I keep talking to people to keep the meeting going. So, but I love to involve parents. So I guess I talk to the parents a lot.
I would say I am half and half. I'm an active participant. This is Emily, by the way, as well as I listen a lot. I always think that it's great when people are asking questions, especially pertaining to a child's mobility and the team is involved in wanting to learn more. That's great. I love that part when people are asking questions. But as a related service, there is a lot of listening as well.
Thank you for all of that. It's interesting to have all the different perspectives and some dual perspectives coming through. Thank you. And you're right that the goal is to kind of have a blend. There's always some meetings where there's one person that might be leading a little bit more, but the goal of a student-led IEP is to really transition that leadership into the student, depending on their age, so that it really is centered on their perceptions, their needs, their strengths. And when that happens, self-determination and advocacy just blossoms, and you see a lot of growth coming from it. This next slide is about the culturally responsive IEP team. Wisconsin has a model that uses culturally responsive practices. And the components are the will, that the students need to have a desire to lead. The fill, to gain the cultural knowledge. And cultural is not necessarily just race or our generational components. It really is like, what family are we in? What school do we go to? And it does tie into any of our diverse backgrounds as well. But even culture could just be the mindsets that we hold. And when I think of some of our children and our students, their mindsets may vary even within a year. So that culturally responsive practice within the IEP team is super important for keeping it relevant and authentic for the student. The third component is skill. So that's that being able to apply knowledge. So some of the things that we can do as parents, as practitioners, is we can make sure that at the beginning of an IEP, it's even stated that we believe that these students can achieve high expectations. That we believe that every child is unique. That we agree to have open communication. Sometimes that's hard. But stating it at the beginning of an IEP can be really powerful and remind people that that's an intention of the meeting. And then the last one is to have an emotionally safe and supportive environment. So again, to agree upon these 4 things at the beginning of an IEP meeting helps set the tone so that collaboration and culturally responsive approaches are in place. Components of an IEP. There are 5 main components of an IEP. The first is the present level of academic achievement and functional performance. Typically, when you're talking about this in an IEP team meeting, you're going to hear a lot of test scores, a lot of data-driven discussions. It may include behavior or grades or just general feedback from people. But it's that data that drives where we're starting with and where we want to be going to, which leads into the second part of goals, right? What are we working towards? What are we hoping that this child can grow to in a year's time? What's the long vision? Where do we hope their dreams are going to? And how are those goals supporting it? They could be goals in specific subject areas or skill areas. Often for our students, we have it tied to our expanded core curriculum. Those are all the goals. The goals then tell us what services are necessary for our students. Goals drive how much service, how much supports, and all of those discussions. The fourth area is that least restrictive environment. It's a goal to provide as much instruction as we can in our mainstreamed environments with peers with same-age peers, really, and like peers. However, there are moments in time when that environment does restrict a student's ability to show what they are able to do. So part of the discussion at an IEP is what environments will those services and supports be given so that the student has as much access as possible to demonstrate their growth, to have access to their grade level curriculums, and to be super successful. And then the fifth item is accommodations. Accommodations are the supports that we can give. Things like providing items in Braille or using a cane, as well as sitting in front. It's all the things that help build a classroom environment, interactions with staff, the materials, any modifications. That's all encompassed within the accommodations. Thanks for hanging in there. This is the hardest part because we talk a lot about the IEP process more than the actual what are we going to do about student-led IEPs. So thanks for hanging in on this part. Again, your child is an IEP team member, or our students are an IEP team member. They're the I in the IEP. And behaviors are often a form of communication. This is something that, especially for our littles or for students that might have more involved needs, that behaviors come up a lot in IEPs. And what we may want to be talking about with our IEP teams at that time is not necessarily what the behavior is, but more what we believe the behavior is stemming from. What skill might the student not have that we need to dig into versus just the behavior itself? We have college and career ready IEPs, meaning that we want our students to have reached their dream goals in whether they're going to college, whether they're joining the community and joining the workforce. Our general process is a 5-step process. We first go to understand the achievement. So we look at, what do we know, right? What data do we have? What do we already know about this kid? And then we move to, how do those needs impact their education, right? That's the identifying effects of the disability and those disability related needs. This is sometimes a tricky question because we can often identify what the need is, but we may not always dig deep enough to understand what skill area is really the highest priority for that student to make progress on it. Then we develop the goals based off that. Our goals are typically what growth can be achieved within a year. Now, as a parent, as an IEP team, it's important to keep looking at that. Sometimes we write these amazing goals that are so high in expectations, and it's true. We want them to reach that and we're going for it. And we realized partially through that maybe it was a little too high, or maybe it was a little too low. And you can always call an IEP meeting, even if it is within that year time. The next step is aligning what services fit in order for that student to grow. And then we analyze the progress and we start all over again. It's a constant moving document, is a live document that runs with the student's needs. Another component that I'm showing here is the CCR IEP 5-step process chart. This can be found within our Wisconsin Department of Education or Instruction. Sorry, in Minnesota, it's an education, not instruction. And this process outlines that step 1 is we identify that what? The current levels. Okay. Step 2 is actually a 3-part. It's identifying how. So this is, how is it actually showing up? The observations, the things that we can say, I see this, which means this. Then it goes to the why. Why do we think it's there? And I don't know if you've ever heard the ask the why 5 times. This is the time that you do that, right? A lot of times, especially I'll go to behavior again, because that's typical in my world right now, is we might say why. And the first one is, well, they don't want to. Well, is it really a want? Well, why don't they want to? Oh, so did they understand what we were talking about? Or for students who may not be able to see what was being talked about, did they have clear understanding? Did they have access to the information that was being shared? Keep digging down into those whys to get to that root cause. And then the third part of step 2 is to summarize it. So if we address the skills that were identified as a root cause, what would be next? Step 3 is the building of those goals. And step 4 is the services. One of my favorite words on this is an architect, because as a case manager, as a family, as a building and a team, it truly is like building this amazing web within the school environment of how to make this written document turn into a fluid action for students. Okay. So let's do a little like engagement here because I've been talking a lot at you all. I have a scenario up on the screen. It says Mary is a second grader with low vision. She has strong relationships with adults and often seeks adults out for engagement instead of her same age peers. Mary shows difficulty with identifying social cues and initiating engagement with others her age. At a second grade level, students utilize facial expressions and body language to communicate and can often anticipate the responses of others using visual information. So let's dig into the scenario a little bit and determine a potential plan. I'm going to ask the first question and then I'll probably pose both of them and then we can just go from there. So the first question is, what is the student's performance in relation to preschool or grade level academic achievement and functional expectations? So how is her performance in comparison to others of her same age? And then how is the disability observed in its effect on the access, engagement, or process? So what can we physically identify as how the disability might be impacting her? I caught there. Preschool should be second. Sorry about that, guys.
It would seem that it's impacting her learning in that she has difficulty in interacting with students within her class. And that would mean that she has less ability to work together with them in performing actions and completing projects.
Thanks, Dave.
It is very typical for the low vision kids to have social goals just because they don't see the body language. They don't understand if a friend is waving in a distance. And then oftentimes they think they're stuck up because they didn't respond with their wave at a younger level. And so they engage with adults faster, typically because that's who they can relate to, they understand their vision, and even though it's not talked about, adults automatically accommodate and step into what their needs are for socializing, where the peers don't.
Yes, I've definitely have seen that with some of my younger students. They just feel more comfortable talking to me as the adults whenever I step into the classroom, and they're not often having those conversations or interactions with their peers that we would kind of like the age appropriate expectation is that they are having these interactions with their peers. And yes, I just don't see that all of the time.
Thanks, Emily.
This is Maria. It could affect their academics too. Like Dave said, they'd be, wouldn't work as well, like socially in a group, but they may be more afraid to ask questions. So then they may be not as far as others because they're afraid to ask those questions in front of their peers. They may wait until the teacher is alone and they may not ask those questions at all.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it sounds like Mary doesn't trust her, like the peers her age, just because she can't necessarily see them the same way that they see her. And she's probably had, because of low vision, she's probably had a lot of adults working with her since her disability was identified. So she's just used to being able to have adults help her out or support her and doing things for her.
Thank you. All of those discussion points lead into this next slide of wondering what the root cause may be. So if I were to summarize some of the comments, right? This is a pretty, it's fairly typical for our vision students to have some difficulty with social interactions and potentially have that bleed over into academics. But I also heard components of the communication, right? Are they able to pick up that nonverbal communication? Is the verbal communication helping that student make connections with what they may not be able to see? Trust, right? Are those relationships there enough that the student is comfortable with it? And then social skills, right? It's a fairly young student, but think of all the social learning that we have that kind of builds to it. So while we know that vision impacts this student, if we asked why, as we kept going on, we might be able to really dig down deep and say their vision is impacting their social awareness or social understanding, or maybe their communication, and really tuck tight onto the root cause that's related to the vision need. This to me is one of the hardest things to do and to think about, because we kind of already have the overarching umbrella identity. But digging down deep to say, wait, yeah, it's vision, but what are the other skill sets that we might be missing because of that? Is key in really creating targeted goals and helping our students develop some other areas that may be lagging skills due to that overarching disability.
And Micaela, one of the important things here, and it is one of the root causes, is isolation. We all know that that child may be the only blind person they know. And you have to have people that you use as models to do things. How does somebody else like me do this? And without that contact, and without those people, even children who are blind or visually impaired around you, you don't learn those things. So isolation is an important aspect.
Thanks, Dave. That also makes me connect to how it might build some of those accommodations, right? And plans throughout an IEP process of how do we make sure that our students are integrated with other students that share the same need? Or how do we help promote within our classroom so that our whole classroom environment is more welcoming and has strategies of how to connect with a student who may be different than what they are? Okay, so this one could be multiple ideas. This is kind of that next step of building a goal. On the screen it says, Mary needs to blank so she can blank, right? There was a lot of information in our scenario, but essentially we're going to want to address the skill that we're assuming it is, and everyone can assume it's a different component within this, right? To be able to access it, but we want that access to be specific to what the goal actually aligns to and still approaches that need. So here's an example. In my frame of mind at the moment, I might say that Mary needs to develop social understanding so that she can better engage with her peers. And I might even go into find that like that social engagement needs to be taught through different methods than someone who maybe has all their vision. So we can go in further and define it. But the big thing is identifying what does she need to do so that she can, and we're being pretty targeted in a specific environment. We know farewell, it would be over the whole building, she would need it. But if we can target it a little more, it'll grow. It does end up generalizing it. Anyone have something that this would remind them of as how we would define what she needs so she can grow that skill area?
We need to develop an understanding of what nonverbal and visual behaviors are. She needs to be able to emulate those behaviors. And this would have the effect of helping to make her fellow students more comfortable with her, since chances are if she can't see the visual behaviors, she's not using them. And to teach those directly so that fellow students feel more comfortable in interacting with her.
Thanks, Dave.
This is Maria. She needs to increase her self-advocacy skills, and so she feels comfortable describing her visual impairment and her needs to others so they understand and she can communicate and keep up with her same age peers.
Thanks, Maria.
I don't have a suggestion, but more of a question, being from the parent side. Do you put all of these like into the IEP? Like, I'm just thinking of my son has, you know, a 26-page IEP already because he sees every therapist. So everything kind of stays high level. Are we supposed to then add to it and have all of these details in there?
Great question. Great question, Julie. Typically, as an IEP team, you would decide on your highest priority needs. A lot of times, our needs do cross over each other. For instance, this need could be related to the advocacy and still connect to academics or additional ways. So when you're looking at that chart of how to kind of walk through the IEP process, often there's times that you can connect different areas of needs. And there are times too where there might be, I mean, we all have hundreds of needs. I can think of 100 needs right now that I have that we go through and say, but this is going to make the biggest impact at this time. So no, you don't have to add them all. Talk with your team about which ones make the most sense for your child. And we'll give you the biggest impact and growth within a year. All right. Now we're talking about the why. Why should we involve these students into the IEP? Little poll again. How have your IEPs that you've been in felt? I have a thumbs up and a thumbs down type scale on the screen, but tell me, have IEPs been pretty positive, good experience, or less so?
Ours have been positive. We've only had 2 because he's 4. So, I mean, at this point, we kind of just trust the team and all of the therapists and what they recommend, since we don't. He's nonverbal, and then we don't always know exactly what the goals are, really.
Perfect. See, Trisha gave a thumbs up.
This is Emily. I've been in really good IEPs, and then I've been in Okay, IEPs, I think something that as professionals we could all get better at is doing that root cause analysis and asking the whys, the 5 whys. You know, sometimes I think we don't go as in depth as we should be going. And that's something that as professionals, hopefully we get better at.
Thanks, Emily.
This is Maria. I feel very fortunate that most of the IEPs that we have are very positive. I have been in some that haven't gone well, but for the most part, everybody works together, the parents and the teachers, and they just want to hear all the information.
Yes, I feel like when everyone is collaborating, you can definitely tell that it's a strong team, it's a strong IEP meeting. When there isn't as much collaboration, that's when things could improve.
Awesome. I am going to keep on rocking here so we can get to some of the examples. That's the fun part, right? Here's some information just saying that when students with disabilities and young adults are involved in their own IEP meetings, it helps them understand their own disability, their own strengths, the areas that they want to work on, any of their modifications that they need. This practice is what leads to greater confidence and that increasing of self-advocacy skills. There's also a little research thrown in. As with their peers, students with significant disabilities who lead their own IEPs develop stronger self-determination skills and acquire greater knowledge about post-secondary transition. Things we can do. We can give students equal voice during the meeting. We can ask them direct questions and provide feedback directly to the students. We can focus on the students' strengths rather than their limitations. We can use easy to understand language. As a professional, we love our alphabet soup, our acronyms. And often that makes it difficult for many team members to understand and be able to communicate in the same type of language. So keeping that in mind, as well as the language that we're using with the level of student that we're talking about or working with within our student-led IEP. And then the fifth thing is maintaining that positive tone. Not that you shouldn't address things that are higher level concern, but approaching it in a very problem-solved type method, trying to find those solutions of addressing a tougher topic in a way that says we can work through this and support you is very important. All right, we are gonna skip that slide. The how, let's have some fun. On this slide, there is a continuum of IEP skills, right? They range from an IEP takes place without a student present. The student presents with minimal participation and or participation. The student is present with some participation, maybe says something about their goals or answers a couple questions. The student is present and actively participates. More questions are given, more responses are given. Then the student starts to take responsibility. Hey, I can share what I'm really good about, or I can share more information about what works well in a math class, or I can share even the things I love about my day. And then the student takes responsibility for most of the process. And finally, the student leads and directs all aspects of the process. The next item are some tools for us. There is a website called imdetermined.org. I'm Determined has some great tools for families and for teachers. This chart is items that a student could partake in both before the meeting, during meeting, and after the meeting. I used to use this with my students as a way to say, what are you open to participating in with this year? Is there something that you want to take some leadership in? Are there areas that you still aren't comfortable in? And we utilize this to share that information with our IEP team beforehand and the family beforehand, so that the student role in the meeting was pretty clearly defined. I'm Determined also has a one-pager. This one-pager has 4 boxes on it that says my strengths, my interests, my preference, and my needs. This is a great tool for our youngers, our youth, right? Our early learners. I've had students that drew pictures and they presented it. Students that even their pictures were still at a scribbling stage, but they were able to scribble and say, I love my dog, or I love my family, when it was time to say, what is your strength, or what are your interests? So it's a template or a tool that could engage learners at any age or ability. I'm Determined also has a student rubric for IEP participation. The rubric is bigger than what is on the screen, but essentially there's components of an IEP, such as IEP awareness or IEP participation. And there is level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4 on it. For IEP awareness, it says something like, I don't know what an IEP stands for. I know what it stands for. I know what an IEP stands for and the purpose of it. And then I know what the IEP stands for, the purpose, and I can tell other people about the meetings. As a teacher, I use this as part of my driving the self-advocacy goals for students. We use this rubric before the beginning of a school year to measure where the student thought they were at, and then post their IEP to say how much growth was gained within their advocacy and within their IEP. Another great tool, typically this is used more with our transition age kids, middle school, high school, is charting the life course, life trajectory. It's a page that has a box on it that says what I don't want, another box that says vision for what I do want, and then 2 lines that kind of point to each box from a same starting point. The goal of this is to have those discussions. Usually it's easier to start with what you don't want, to be able to identify what a student wants and the steps to get to that want. This trajectory, I've used it even in staff meetings, in smaller meetings where it's like, hey, we can identify the problem. Let's start identifying the solution. Or for students, it's usually easier to say, this is not what works for me, but here's where I'm going, and watch me get there. Let's map it out. Name one way that you hope a child that you're working with would participate in their IEP. We can do a quick round on it and we'll keep going.
I'll start. This is Emily. Identifying their own strengths, what they think they did really well in, areas they did well in. I think that's really helpful for them to reflect and to recognize.
Thanks, Emily.
I always liked it when students labeled or brought up the tools that were really helpful and the wishes that they may want that they've heard about from friends or others in the field.
Thanks, Tricia.
I would like to see my son be able to tell the team what like the favorite part of his day is.
Thanks, Julie.
This is Maria. I like the prep work before the IEP. I mean, I like to talk to the kids during their IEP, but I really like how they come to me if they're really worried about it and they talk about it ahead of time, and we can talk about some of those concerns they have before they're in front of the whole team.
Thanks, Maria. All right, let's show some examples here. I had a student that this is how she started her presentation. We typically used Google Slides or presentations to walk through our student-led IEPs. We found that having that organization was super helpful for students as they were taking on that leadership role. This student said, "First slides are well, are awkward. So I think it was supposed to say so awkward. Hi and good afternoon. Welcome to the student's IEP." It's great when students can involve humor into their IEP as well as just show their personalities. This student that I have on screen is a young man. His slide says that he has a condition called retinitis pigmentosa. He said his peripheral vision is not great. It's very blurry to the sides, and above and below is all black. Seeing in the dark is impossible. Seeing things far away is hard because everything blurs together like splattered letters. Let's see if I can get the video.
I'm going to be showing you what my vision looks like. Well, I can see this, I can't see this. I can't see this, I can't see this, I can't see this, I can see this. I can't see this, I can see this.
So that video showed this young man using his hands to indicate where he could see and where he could not see, which really told a lot to his teachers because he, in all honesty, when he was in a classroom, didn't struggle very much from the academic standpoint, but from a mobility standpoint, he really had some struggles that were not necessarily the easiest to identify just by looking at the young man. Uh-oh, let's see if we can get out of here. There we go. The next one has a measurable goal. This student, I was able to identify and keep track of his goal of learning 25 key commands. And he acknowledged that he met this goal within the year. And he also helped to identify the next step in it. He wanted to learn more new Google Drive key commands. I will say as a practitioner, sometimes that's the question is like, does this student have the ability to truly identify what goal should come next for them and how high what is that highest expectation? And I found the more that we developed this process with their students, the more accurate the goals became. And usually as a practitioner, I was like, you're right, you're spot on. I don't need to change anything except for maybe talking a little bit about making things a little higher of an expectation or changing the location where it's being expected of. It's a pretty cool experience. Another funny one, in the middle of a slide, this young man just wrote, "Jack was here," twice. So in the middle of his presentation, he just belted this out. And again, from a formal meeting standpoint, allowing our students to show their personality definitely brought a lot to the meeting. This was a young man who was in 3rd grade at the time. He wrote in his concerns that he was distracted by other kids, noise, silliness, and movement. Sometimes it was helpful to have a place in the room where he could move away from other kids, but he didn't want to go to another room. And this was huge because the team had also acknowledged that he did better when he had some space at times. From an adult lens, many of the adults were asking him to leave the classroom that he was in order to have that space. And his voice was able to find an appropriate solution. I'm going to skip that one. Special factors. This is always a fun one to talk about. Special factors is a part of the IEP that we talk about. And one of the questions is, does the student's behavior impede his or her learning or that of others? I've had other teachers that we talk about, is this appropriate to talk about? Because some students that do have those behaviors just maybe aren't aware of them, or it might come off as a punitive discussion. And we always approached it as behavior doesn't mean bad. Behavior just is things that might impact your learning in other kids. Like, do you have any unique characteristics that do that? And this child was like, no, I'm just not that sort of kid. Again, just another personality slide about transition plans. This young lady had said that she wanted to continue to go to a 4-year college. She wanted to be able to have a career, had listed many of them. And when we talked about living at home or by herself was a huge piece of it. This transition plan is a part of our transition IEPs that happen after a student is reached age 14. It's all about planning for that post-secondary experience. And these components were a part of that IEP. All right. Using videos can be amazing to show, especially for our young ones that may not have developed the skills yet to be in a long meeting, right? Here's an example of something we used in an IEP.
It has a tail. It does. But that's not what I'm looking for. But that's not what I'm looking for either. What are we looking for? I'm looking for that bumpy brain. You are correct. Can you put 2 hands in and look for that bumpy brain? Bumpy brain. This one is bumpy. Let's take the brain. You are correct. Wiggling. But the worm is long and skinny, and we need the round, bumpy brain. Are you putting 2 hands in? Good work.
Are you all able to hear it when I'm playing? I should have probably asked that on the last one.
Yes.
Good. That would have been really silly if it wouldn't have come through. This young man was playing Fred's head, that you have plastic items that we had explored previously to it. And some of the questions, he's a very verbal young man. Some of the areas that we were talking about at his meeting was how well he was able to generalize concepts once the language was developed, but we weren't always demonstrating it in the classroom. And this kind of showed some of the ways that he was able to start making connections between items. All right, don't play it again, screen. Here he is again, sharing some information. I believe it's regarding what he likes. Let's check it out.
Charlie, what do you really like to do? What do you like to play with? The braille. You like to play with the braille? What else? The dots. The dots? What else? Your balls. And the balls? Anything else? Your popping thing. Oh, the popping things. That is a pretty fun one. And the book. What's your favorite thing to play with at school? Toys. Toys? Love it.
Again, the impact that it has, just hearing that voice, I can't help, I don't know if, I can't see you all, we have cameras off, but I don't know about you, but it makes me just sit there and smile when you can hear it. This next one was an example of a little lady who was learning to use her cane to go up the stairs. She is a nonverbal student. So one of the ways that we were showing her skills were just through video representation of it. For the sake of time and being able to get through some of our other components, I'm going to skip this video, but if you're interested in it, I'm happy to share it at the end if we have time. This young man, whoa, crazy. Don't touch the screen, Micaela. It goes crazy. Okay. Sorry about that, Brew. This young man was able to talk about his goals connected to some of his academic coursework in elementary school. It says Everett will be able to identify himself in a variety of different categories, levels 1 through 5, on a perceived exertion chart.
you feel when you walked in the gym today?
What do you want to get better at?
I want to get better at the pacer test. I got 21 the last 2 times. I want to get more than 21. Another thing I want to get better at is to not have to do things by myself and not have any of Mr. Elder's help.
This was huge for this young man. In previous years, he was uncomfortable speaking at an IEP meeting. So he would help dictate and we would write the words, but an adult would share it. He also had a whole IEP meeting that was led through video. So he sat and he clicked it, even to say like, let's go around and introduce ourselves. It was a video. So he did not speak once in the meeting, but he did direct the meeting through video. This example is all of images. This young man on the screen is a student who was deaf and blind. He's a student that academically we were working on just being able to utilize those tactile skills, to be able to build stamina and understanding in the skill itself. And a lot of this related to communication and how we set up his environment for learning. So during his IEP, the team took pictures of his work environment, how he had a work to do basket, a completed basket, and a table with tactile cues on how to do that. Most of his work was pretty similar. They were similarly patterned, so he could use the same learning strategies in multiple activities. We were able to do this for math, for concepts, just even for work completion. He was a kid that we were working on just independent skills. His second part of functional performance, we had used a tactile calendar system with him, and he was able to set up his day with some supports. His favorite time of day was typically when he was out of the classroom for his work tasks. Within the school setting that he was in, he would go fill the soda machine. He would return notes to teachers. And this was all fairly highly supported, but that was his favorite thing. So we were able to take in the days of the week with jobs. He had a communication book that he wore on him with his highly asked and requested items, which included being able to blow his nose and get a drink, eat, use the bathroom, or just to be done with whatever we were doing. When we approached the IEP with the family, these tools were able to help build a communication line between us and build some strategies between the house and the home that were just really difficult to do with a student who wasn't able to tell us that directly. The images then also supported all of our goals that we wrote for this child, and how we were utilizing it within the day so that it was consistent, so that again, we take this written document that is a legal document and we changed it into how does this actually look for this student throughout the day. And a lot of his work was, as a team, we were able to really embed that and his growth just shot up. A few statements about student-led IEPs. This one is from a high school student. I would say it's been a couple years since we had this quote. You'd be amazed to see where he's at right now as far as work, career, life. He's doing amazing. But he said, I was first very skeptical. I wanted to make sure that all bases were covered and this was his mom. I wanted to make sure that all bases were covered and all of Trevor's needs were met. I was used to being the one to talk about it. I am extremely pleased with how this process has helped Trevor to mature, to get his own needs met, and to learn to talk about himself and his disability. It was really fun to see this the spin that Trevor put on the meetings too. His personality shined through, and his use of humor made the meeting light and less stressful, which I know was good for him and me. I feel like he's much better prepared to advocate for himself in college from this experience. I think that student-led meetings are a great idea and beneficial to the students and parents. I would highly recommend them. This one is signed from an angry teen turned happy adult. She reports, when I was starting to have to talk in quotation marks in my IEP, I hated it. I didn't want to be a part of a meeting that I was all about the things that I couldn't do. I'm lacing it with the tone that she typically talked in. With my teacher's help, I began to notice that if I led the discussion, then I controlled the feeling of the meeting. Powerful for her. I could admit the things that things were hard. I could share what I wanted and needed. Because I had this opportunity, I'm now a CNA. I went to college. I live on my own. I'm proud of where I am. Again, signed, the angry teen turned happy adult. So I want to open up for the last couple minutes to just say, where do you hope that your meetings are going to, or what do you want them to sound like? Or do you want to just talk about some of the things that I showed that we didn't really discuss? Open it all up. Anything's welcome.
Well, Micaela, my comment is on process and how you did things. You do an excellent job of describing what's on the screen.
Thank you, Dave.
If you have at least one takeaway from this meeting, I want to commend you for how well you did it and how consistently you did it.
Thank you, Dave.
Okay, I have a question for you. How would a parent go about requesting more involvement out of their child to a district that doesn't involve the students in the IEP process as much as they'd like?
Great question. I think it's helpful, just anytime there's connection, just reach out to the teacher and say, this is something I want to throw your way, and have discussions about how could that happen. If that's a relationship that you have with that teacher, that's a great place to start, even outside the IEP meeting. As a professional who really valued involving students in teams that didn't always value it, I found that by highlighting a need for self-advocacy and making sure that there was a goal connected to what that might look like for the student in a year, that built it already into our living legal document of the IEP. So it's another area to discuss at an IEP meeting of self-advocacy is an important skill. And that's an area that might be able to approach it from the student IEP lens.
Thank you. That was a great answer.
And you might also include that involvement in the IEPE itself, since it's part of the expanded core curriculum anyway.
Yes, sir.
This is Maria. I really liked your rubric that you had, that the student, I can't remember what it said, student rubric for IEP participation.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have that available as like a PDF that you typically do, or do you have it as a Google Doc, Word doc that you could share?
It is on the I'm Determined website, and I think
Okay.
I may have already, did I link it at the bottom? It might be in the resources section here too. Oh, if not, shoot me an email, Maria, and I can get you a direct link too.
Sure.
But it is available on imdetermined.org.
Okay. Yeah, I really liked it. I think videos are great. I know, with permissions and everything, want to make sure we get permissions to record and all of that. But seeing those little ones on your video, they're adorable. And to hear those, I mean, it does give a really strong, powerful voice. So I really liked the incorporation of that.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And just so everybody knows, all the videos were approved by family.
Oh, yes.
So just so everybody, it's probably good. Some of the students, some of you may know too. So.
And I agree with Dave. You've done an excellent job with describing everything that you've presented.
Thank you.
Just a reminder to let everybody know that this PowerPoint is in the live binder under her session class name.
Excellent. And I do believe there is, well, we can click off this slide as we're looking. There is the resources page. So we have that all on there. I also have my contact information. So if there is any follow-up, I welcome it. Please reach out.
Thank you so much. This is amazing session. I'm very thankful that you joined us at this conference this year.
Thank you. Is there anything next time that people are like, get rid of this and add more of this?
I think your videos were great. I think you brought a lot of new ideas and creativity to how students can be active members of their IEP team, even if they don't want, to be speaking at the meeting. There's still different ways we can incorporate them so they are active members. So thank you for bringing up those other ideas. Very helpful.
Thanks, Emily. Excellent. Julie, I hope that your next report of the IEP that comes next week is going to be like, we've got some good ideas of how to incorporate your son, and we can reach that goal of him sharing what he loves about school.
Yeah, thanks. I hope so too.
Favorite activities, video and laughter goes a long way too. So